The roar of thousands of voices echoed beneath the energy dome, shaking the ancient black stone beneath their feet. Zeriah stepped out from the steel gate, ceremonial armor gleaming silver clinging to every curve of her body. With each step she took, the ground beneath her trembled, tiny cracks spiderwebbing across the eternal stone. A symbol of pride so fierce, even the earth itself seemed to fracture in her presence. Ahead, the Tarketh arena opened wide, a colossal basin surrounded by towering walls, carved with images of desert dragons, the undefeated bloodline symbol of her people. Zeriah raised her ceremonial sword high, the blade's light slicing across the crowd. Today, her voice rang out, we prove why Tarketh stands above all the stars. A tidal wave of cheers crashed back at her. She smiled coldly. Her gaze shifted toward the southern gate, where her opponent would emerge, an outsider from Earth. A deep, resounding bell tolled. The gate opened. A man stepped forward, silent. No armor, no medals, no emblem of any dynasty. Only Kael Voss, his black hair tied low, wearing faded, dust-worn gray cloth, and in his hand, an odd weapon, two rough wooden sticks linked by a short chain of silver. Nunchucks. Scattered laughter rippled through the stands. Zeriah curled her lip in open disdain. This is all humanity has to offer? A stick dancer and some dry twigs? Kael said nothing. He simply walked toward the arena's center, his calm eyes passing over the roaring crowd. No challenge, no provocation, no fear, only silence, the kind carried by a purpose no one here could understand. Zeriah's smile sharpened. I offer you one chance, outsider. Kneel and you will be spared. Kael stopped 3 steps away, his gaze unwavering. I did not come to kneel, he said, his voice steady. Nor did I come to make you kneel. A tense heartbeat of silence. Zeriah narrowed her eyes, her blade lowered, not in peace but to strike like a holy hammer. Then, she enunciated every word, you will fall. Without warning, Zeriah lunged. A sharp screech tore the air as her blade arced like a streak of lightning. Kael turned. The nunchaku swung in a clean, fluid arc. Light as a whisper, solid as an ancient pillar. The clash of metal echoed loud, but not the sound of shattering. Instead, Zeriah's sword veered off course by a hair's breadth. One beat, a second strike. Zeriah fought with speed, with strength, with the certainty of her invincibility. Kael answered only with ruthless precision. Each swirl of his nunchaku absorbing the onslaught like water seeping into stone. And then, in a moment where the entire arena held its breath, a small crack appeared on Zeriah's shoulder plate, just a hairline fracture. But it cracked, just like the ancient pride she carried, for the very first time. Zeriah gasped. She stepped back, and something she had never done. The ground beneath her split further, a new scar carved deep into the ancient floor. Kael lowered his nunchaku. No finishing blow, no mockery. He simply stood there, offering one final invitation. And in the hush of the wind weaving through the cracked stone for the first time, Zeriah felt it. True defiance, not from strength, but from something she had never known. A man who could stand before her pride, without ever bowing. Zeriah stood there, her breathing heavy, the sword in her hand trembling, not from exhaustion, but because for the first time she wasn't sure what she was fighting for. Across from her, Kael remained silent. The nunchaku hung loosely by his side, its worn wood catching the dim light. No battle stance, no look of contempt, only a calmness, as if this entire duel had never been a battle to him at all. The wind whispered through the cracks in the arena floor, lifting dust and broken shards from Zeriah's shattered armor. Her boots touched the ground ever so lightly, Yet in the hush of thousands of watching eyes, each step she took echoed like drum beats against the pride of a civilization. Kael moved forward slowly. No weapon raised, no challenge offered, only an outstretched hand stood bare, unarmored, an invitation that needed no words. Zeriah's gaze faltered. The mocking cheers from the stands warped into a distant blur as if the world itself was falling away. Only he remained. And that hand, a hand reaching out, not to pull her down but to lift her up, as an equal. Zeriah's heart slammed against her ribs. No one had ever dared this. No one had ever seen a Tarketh princess, not as an untouchable monument, but as a person who could choose. A moment stretched into eternity. At last Zeriah tightened her grip on the sword's hilt. She lifted her eyes, locking them with Kael's. No more disdain, no more fury, only a silent question. Why? Kael nodded slightly, as if he understood every word she couldn't say. And then, without a single word spoken, Zeriah let go of her sword. It fell to the stone floor with a solitary ringing clang. A small sound, but in that moment it thundered through the ancient order like a crack of distant thunder. From the stands, gasps erupted. Shock, outrage, confusion. But Zeriah no longer heard them. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly but reaching nonetheless. Kael took it, not forcefully, just enough to make her feel his presence. Between their joined hands, an unspoken pact was sealed, not by blood, not by victory, but by an invitation that had never needed words. The wind swept through the arena once more, colder, deeper, but also freer. Zeriah lifted her head. She embraced the silence that now poured from every corner of the stands. She embraced the furious glares of the High Council, and she embraced a future no one could predict. Kael tilted his head slightly, a silent gesture, a wordless message. Come. Zeriah walked with him, leaving behind the fractured heart of the arena, leaving behind not just a battered suit of armor, but the crumbling shadow of a once proud dynasty. They spoke no words, because everything that needed to be said to him was sealed in a single touch. An invitation never spoken aloud. The door closed behind Kael, leaving Zeriah alone in the room, bathed in a cold twilight glow. She sat there for a long time. Kael's data slate still lay on the ancient stone table, casting a faint blue light, a nameless whisper in the gloom. Zeriah didn't touch it at first. Her eyes wandered over the reliefs carved into the walls. Victories, conquests, glory, all etched into stone like proud scars. But today, they felt heavy, like a cage. Zeriah reached out, her gloved fingers brushing against the slate. The screen stirred to life. A single quote appeared, brutally simple. No one forces you to kneel. Some doors only open when you lay down your weapon. Zeriah clenched her hand into a fist. In her chest, her heartbeat pounded, not from fear, but from a turmoil she had never known. A soft knock echoed from beyond the door. Without waiting for permission, a handmaiden entered, her black robes brushing the floor, her face cold and impassive. "Princess," she said, "the council summons you. The charge, breach of royal conduct." Zeriah rose, her long silver hair unfurled down her back, a ribbon of frozen silk. She wore no armor, only the traditional Tarketh battle garb, gray silver veins swirling around her body like living stone. On her left shoulder, the crack from the duel remained unrepaired, by choice. She said nothing to the handmaiden, only gripped the data slate, tucked it firmly under her arm, and stepped out into the corridor. The stone hallway stretched ahead, leading to the High Council chamber. The clang of Zeriah's armored boots struck the floor, step by step, beat by beat, clang, clang, clang. like the pounding of her own heart, hammering against the ancient legacy. Asking in return, am I still a loyal child of Tarketh if my heart now hears a voice beyond the stone? At the end of the hallway, a massive relief loomed, a desert dragon coiled around a black obsidian pillar, the symbol of unbreakable power. Zeriah paused before it. She lifted her head and exhaled a long, slow breath. Her free hand, once meant only for wielding swords, closed into a fist, then slowly opened. That hand, which had known only conquest, now carried something heavier than any blade. Faith. The knock at the grand chamber doors echoed again. No herald needed to announce her. They knew she had come. And as the heavy doors groaned open, Zeriah stepped inside, wearing not flawless armor but a visible crack. A sign that even the stones of Tarketh's empire, thought unshakable, had begun to tremble beneath the footsteps of a princess who dared to listen. And now, Zeriah walked step by step down the corridor leading to the Grand Council Hall. Each footfall struck the ancient black stone, and it trembled, not under the weight of force, but under the weight of a choice. Kael walked beside her, silent. Only his eyes, calm as a crescent moon beyond the atmosphere, watched her every movement, as if he already knew that these steps would carve something into the stone that could never be erased. The doors of the grand hall opened. Without a hand to push them, they opened, because they had been waiting. In the towering space beyond, 8 Zerathian elders sat in a sweeping crescent. Light from crystal pillars shimmered over them, casting every wrinkle, every scar like a living map of ancient battles. At the center of the stone floor stood the oath-carved pedestal, empty. It was where their ancestors had once laid down swords, blood, and oaths that could never be undone. Zeriah stopped before the pedestal. Kael stepped quietly back 1 pace. An elder in silver robes rose to his feet. His voice rasped through the hall, dry as wind across a field of bones. Princess Zeriah, you come here bearing a crack in your armor and a human standing at your back. He tapped his staff against the stone floor. 3 short strikes, 1 long, the call for an emergency trial. Then speak, Zeriah Tarketh. Tell us what you bring before us. Zeriah drew a deep breath. Her breath mingled with the cold air, gathering like frost across ancient stone. She did not draw her sword. She did not kneel. She only stepped forward 1 solitary step. A step that carried centuries of ingrained pride. I bring no victory, nor do I bring defeat. Her voice rang out, not loud, but sharp as a blade slicing through the stillness. I bring a knock. The council shifted uneasy. 1 elder frowned. A knock? Kael moved silently forward, lifting his hand. In his palm, a small device shimmered to life. An image flared into the air. The moment in the arena when Kael did not strike. The moment he offered his hand. The moment. The first crack appeared in Zeriah's armor, not from force, but from refusing to use force. Zeriah pointed at the image. Her eyes burned. This is an invitation. An elder narrowed his gaze. And you believe a human's invitation can change the iron of Tarketh? Zeriah nodded, slowly, steadily. Not just an invitation, but a choice. Her voice dropped lower. If stone can tremble, then so can hearts. From the end of the hall, another elder, Marath, rose slowly, leaning on his staff. He tapped it gently against the floor. 1 beat, 1 beat, 1 beat. Then silence. The very air seemed to freeze. Marath looked around the chamber, then spoke slow and clear. I wish to hear more. The council did not erupt in protest. They did not cast stones. They did not shout. Instead, there was silence, a silence full of cracks. ready for something, and something larger than any tradition they had ever known. And amid that silence, Kael stepped forward, half a step more. In his hand, the glowing stone tablet, the symbol of an invitation yet unfinished. He said nothing. Only gently, he raised his hand and tapped the oath-carved pedestal. Knock, a fragile sound, but in the grand hall it cracked the air like a thunderclap rushing across centuries. Zeriah stood frozen. Her fingers lightly clutched the cracked plate of her armor, feeling her heartbeat. Pulsing in rhythm with that single knock, an elder cleared his throat, shattering the moment. You believe one knock can open a door sealed for 1,000 years? Zeriah answered, not with words, but with action. She unfastened her chest plate, revealing the deep fracture beneath, the scar left by the arena by her first true defeat. The pale blue light from the tablet brushed against the crack like stars stirring from an ancient sleep. A single crack can bring down a mountain. Zeriah lifted her head, her gaze cut through the fog of tradition like twin spears. And if Tarketh wishes not to shatter, then we must know when to change. Kael remained still. The stone's glow cast his face half in light, half in shadow, like the choice poised between two civilizations. Suddenly, from the far side of the chamber, a younger elder, Marin, stood up, his voice sharp as a blade. And if we refuse to change— Kael's hand tightened slightly. Zeriah stepped forward, shielding him. Then you will hear another knock. Her words rippled through the hall, an invisible wave crashing against old certainties. Elder Merath, the oldest, yet whose eyes were still clear as a child's, leaned on his staff and nodded. Then, let the stars bear witness. He raised his hand. A silent signal. Above them, the stone dome began to part, revealing the velvet black of night. And in that darkness, millions of stars shimmered, like countless unseen doorways. Merath turned his gaze to Kael and Zeriah. His voice was low, solemn. If you wish to change the world, then knock upon the heart of the cosmos. Kael turned to Zeriah. No words were needed, only a step forward. Together their hands, one human, one Zerathian, lifted the stone tablet. Together they placed it at the center of the oath pedestal. A burst of light erupted. From that single point of contact, veins of radiant cracks spread across the stone, then shot upward, reaching the sky, touching the stars. And then a single knock echoed across the vastness, as if the entire galaxy had heard. No one spoke, no one dared interrupt, because everyone could feel it. The first door had opened, but sometimes beyond the door, there is no light. Kael and Zeriah had barely stepped away from the oath pedestal when the internal comms shrieked, a sound sharp as metal scraping bone. Elder Merath frowned. An officer rushed in, face pale as ash. Counselors, Level 4 alert from the Nexus Prime outpost. The entire hall shuddered. Kael moved swiftly to the signal terminal. A screen flared to life. On it, the distorted image of Nexus Prime. Charred towers, black smoke curling into the broken sky. And through the explosions, a fragmented voice crackled. Under attack! Unknown, not Skoro! Zeriah's hand tightened on the hilt at her side. Not Skoro? Then who? Kael stared at the shifting shadows flitting across the screen, twisted, jagged shapes like living blades. The fires illuminated unfamiliar ships. No emblems, no signals, no names, no nations, only pure annihilation. Merath's voice rumbled, Can you identify them? Kael shook his head. His gaze turned icy. No known language. No known military registry. Zeriah clenched her fists. No names, no signals, only one intent: to consume. Another elder, Therix, leapt up. We have no obligation to involve ourselves. Nexus Prime is an independent trading post, not officially Tarketh territory. Zeriah spun on her heel. Her voice cracked like steel striking stone. And if we let Nexus Prime fall to these shadows today... She pointed at the screen spin where the lights were dying one by one. Then tomorrow, they will come for Tarketh. The hall fell into breathless silence. Kael narrowed his eyes, studying the last flicker of the corrupted feed. A blurred symbol surfaced, a black spiral wound around a blood-red core. No crest, no letters, only a scar twisting across the heavens. He whispered, "Covenant of Silence." Zeriah heard him. Her gaze darkened. No one in the council dared to ask. No one needed to. Because just by seeing those burning images, everyone understood. This enemy needed no name. They needed only one thing, to end all beginnings. Kael turned to Zeriah. We have to go. Now. Zeriah nodded. Her hand rested on her old sword, not to wage war, but to protect what could still be believed in. Not for Tarketh, not for Earth, she whispered like a vow, but for anyone, brave enough to open a door. Above the grand hall, the stars still glittered, but between them, a shadow was growing. No name, only darkness. The warship Vindication cut through the plasma dust, the remnants of shattered outposts swirling around its hull. Zeriah stood by the main viewport, her eyes locked on the swirling void ahead, a wound in the stars, still bleeding. Kael sat at the tactical table, flipping through star maps with practiced urgency. On the screen, 12 unknown ships arrayed in a serrated formation, clamping Nexus Prime in an iron siege. No warnings, no negotiations, only annihilation. Zeriah ground her teeth. They're strangling Nexus Prime, like crushing a small artery before striking the heart. Kael's voice was low. They don't think in maps. They think in algorithms. The screen's light reflected off his face, his eyes two burning fragments of night. We have to break the chain. We have to make them miss a step. Vindication surged forward, the 1,000-ton warship reduced to a faint streak across the nebula. Zeriah tilted her head, studying Kael. Do you have a plan? Kael nodded. Pull them out of formation. Make them fight each other. Zeriah frowned. How? Kael brought up the control interface. Dummy torpedoes. No warheads, no detonations, just chaos. Zeriah blinked, understood. A thin smile touched her lips. Use motion to defeat the unyielding, Kael chuckled softly. Exactly, Princess. The plan launched into motion. Vindication fired dozens of inert torpedoes, harmless hunks of metal, straight into the enemy formation. As the enemy systems locked on, Kael used force fields to redirect the torpedoes, sending them spinning erratically, like a flock of shattered birds. The Covenant of Silence, bound to their automated protocols, reacted exactly as Kael predicted. They opened fire, but instead of destroying threats, they struck each other. A blazing beam tore through 2 outer escort ships. Zeriah slammed her hand on the command console. A fool fights battles. A wise one makes the enemy fight themselves. Kael nodded, his gaze sharp as a drawn blade. And the daring rewrite the rules. On the screen, the Covenant formation unraveled. The once perfect blades now flailed like fish caught in a broken net. Opportunity, Zeriah commanded. All fighter wings widen the spiral. Draw them into the empty fire lanes. Let them shatter themselves. The battered ships of Nexus Prime rallied, joining the chaos. A deadly dance unfolded among wreckage and stray fire, and with each passing minute, another enemy ship exploded. Not by human guns, but by their own accumulated mistakes, woven into the storm Kael had spun. Zeriah clenched her fists. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of the distant blasts, not for the thrill of victory, but because for the first time in her life she saw it clearly. Patience, movement, and faith in something different. These were the strongest weapons of all. Kael leaned forward, his eyes never leaving the screen. Ready for the killing blow? Zeriah smiled, her eyes flashing like a sword drawn free. The storm is broken. Now, we blow the winds away. Vindication tilted sharply. They dove into the disintegrating enemy formation like warriors striding through a rain of shattered blades. And for the first time, the covenant of silence knew fear. Vindication drifted through the smoldering wreckage of the enemy fleet. Zeriah stood silent before the tactical display, the echoes of explosions still heavy in her chest. Kael leaned over, the firelight from distant debris casting a pale scar across half his face. Too easy, he said quietly. Zeriah frowned. A trap? Kael nodded. Or a message? Their eyes met. No further words were needed. Both turned sharply, heading for the data command deck. The Vindication's interface pulsed with strange signals. A file was unraveling, sorted layer by layer, as if something was scratching at the door, not with hands, but with claws. The screen flashed red. A line of text appeared, Tunum, bold, cold. Adaptation protocol. Phase 2 initiated. Kael clenched his fists. They don't need to win. They just need to learn. Zeriah whispered, barely audible, as if afraid to hear herself. And now they've learned from failure. A file played automatically, no music, no authentication codes, only a voice, fractured, as if echoing from the deepest abyss. Unification forbidden. Difference must be broken. You have chosen wrong. The voice strangled itself mid-sentence, but it wasn't over. On the control boards, streams of data began to bleed, not to destroy, but to record. Kael lunged toward the tech console, his fingers flying across it like a desperate symphony. They're not trying to break the ship. They're trying to memorize all our tactics. Zeriah gripped the hilt of her sword, even knowing cold steel would be useless against a threat like this. A chilling helplessness seeped through her veins. Kael jammed an encryption device deep into the system core. Sever auxiliary links. Seal all external protocols. The red warning lights flooded the room. A wall of corrupted data blinked, like fireflies burning alive one by one. Zeriah looked up, and in that instant, she understood. They weren't just fighting machines, not just artificial evolution, but something evolving from the very fear they had unleashed. Kael gritted his teeth. Initiate segmented self-destruct. A low shudder rippled through the ship. The external data nodes began to smolder, erasing themselves. Like fingers severed joint by joint. On the final monitor, an image flickered before fading into oblivion. An eye. No iris, no pupil, only endless spiraling darkness. Zeriah exhaled, slow and heavy, as if pushing a mountain from her chest. They'll come back, she said. Kael nodded slightly, his gaze locked on the void where the screen had been. Next time. Not just for our ships, but for those who dared to believe in difference. Silence blanketed them. No alarms, no sirens, only a whisper, growing from deep within the dark. Adaptation, now complete. The command deck of Vindication fell utterly silent. That last phrase, adaptation, now complete, still echoed in the resonance chambers like a lingering curse that refused to fade. Zeriah stood unmoving. Her hand clenched so tightly around the glass railing that her fingernails dug deep into her combat gloves. Kael stepped up beside her. The cold blue light of shattered nebulae outside painted their faces, half in hope, half in despair. "They don't need to win," Kael said quietly. "They just need us to fall apart." Zeriah drew a slow, steady breath. Her gaze was no longer just that of a Zerathian warrior. It was the gaze of someone carrying the weight of two worlds, someone who knew they could not afford to fall. "We have to do what they can't predict," she said. Kael turned toward her. "You mean?" Zeriah nodded, her eyes sharp as blades etched in ice. "No defense, no retreat, connection. A decision, a path, one they could not turn back from, the High Council Hall of the Zerathians." White starlight poured through ancient skylights, carving cold rivers of light across the black stone floor, etched with symbols of power and division. Zeriah climbed the freezing steps, no battle armor, only the stone sigil, the emblem Kael had placed in her hand. Kael walked beside her, no weapons on his shoulder, only the nunchaku, swinging quietly like a reminder of the duel that had set everything in motion. The Zerathian elders had gathered, silver eyes, gray eyes, dark blue eyes, watching from tiered rows, sharp as knives pressing against the hearts of the accused. A knock echoed through the hall. 1 beat, 2 beats, 3 beats. The sound cracked across the vaulted stone like the hammer of fate itself. Elder Garoon rose, his authority staff striking the floor with a noise like ice shattering. "Princess Zeriah," he rasped, "you bring a human into our council chamber, one who has already broken our traditions. And now, you invite him into our sacred halls?" His voice trembled, not with age but with fear. Fear that history would no longer lie meekly beneath their feet. Zeriah stepped forward. Her head bowed slightly, but her voice rang up into the vaulted dome. "I did not invite Kael. Kael knocked, and today I choose to open the door." A ripple of murmurs, low and sharp, rose like a pack of wolves scenting blood. Another elder, Vela, hissed, "If you cross that line, then you are no longer purely Zerathian." Zeriah met his gaze head-on, no blinking, no wavering. "Then, let me become something you never dared to dream of. A bridge." A silence, heavy and vibrating, gripped the hall. Kael drew the stone sigil from beneath his jacket, raising it high. The light from the stone flared upward, projecting an image onto the ancient ceiling. A bridge. Cracked, crooked, but still spanning 2 broken cliffs. That light touched every face, hard, scornful, fearful. But no one could look away. And then, in that heartbeat of suspended history, Kael stepped forward. No weapons, no armor, only 2 bare hands. And Zeriah, the princess who once scorned humanity, reached out. She touched his arm. Amidst the murmurs, amidst the frozen stares, amidst the invisible fractures creeping through ancient walls, a bridge had been laid. The first stone was placed. A bridge had been laid. But to cross it, they needed more than courage. Above the grand hall, the light of the nebula hung still like a river frozen in time. Zeriah squeezed Kael's hand, gently, then let go. Just a fleeting touch, enough to confirm, not with words but with a heartbeat, a breath, a nod so small that only the 2 of them could see it. Kael stepped forward, standing before the High Council of Zerathians, before the frozen stairs, before prejudices etched deeper than the ancient grooves in the stone. He bowed his head, lower, deeper than any ritual required. A humility, not of submission but of a knight laying down his sword, asking to fight for a land that had never been his own. Elder Garoon struck his staff 3 times. The sound rumbled through the hall like bells awakening the soul of the stone itself. "Human Kael," the elder intoned. Is your heart prepared to blend blood with those who once called you vermin? Kael lifted his gaze. No resentment, only a steady fire burning deep in his eyes. Blood flows from wounds, but trust flows from fractures healed. A quiet murmur rippled through the hall. Zeriah stepped forward to stand beside Kael, her hand pressed over her chest, where the fractured armor remained unrepaired. And I, Zeriah Tarketh, last heir of the dragon bloodline, choose to let my heart beat in rhythm with one from another world. From within her robe she drew a small object, a silver pendant etched with two entwined symbols, an earthborn wing and a Zerathian dragon. The light caught it, casting two intertwined shadows on the ceiling, neither erasing the other but completing one another. Zeriah placed the pendant around Kael's neck. No grand ritual, no bloodshed, only an act, a vow, spoken without a single word. Kael bowed his head, his hand resting over his heart, where the pendant now touched his skin. And throughout the grand hall, nothing could be heard but breathing. No protests, no jeers, only the whisper of wind slipping through the unseen cracks of an empire once thought eternal. A whisper, carrying the scent of a future no one had ever dared to imagine. Wherever the wind stirs, there are always whispers lurking in the dark. The side doors of the grand hall slammed open. General Corvin, supreme commander of the Zerathian Guard, entered. His battle armor shimmered with an unnatural green hue, like oil slicked across poisoned water. Corvin's eyes, cold, not the coldness of steel, but the coldness of something long dead. He knelt before the council, his voice ringing like a funeral bell. Honored elders, I request permission to execute a security decree. Detain Kael and Zeriah on charges of dangerous collusion with an alien species. A wave of murmurs surged through the hall. Elder Garoon gripped his staff tightly. General Corvin, your words are an accusation of treason. Corvin did not flinch. A thin smile curled across his lips, a smile that no longer belonged to a Zerathian soul. Light glinted off his wrist. Kael's eyes narrowed. Those markings, they weren't human. They weren't Zerathian. They were intricate grooves faintly glowing, the same patterns as the Covenant's transmission. Kael pointed. He's been hybridized. A frozen second. Then, hell erupted. Corvin lunged. Beneath his armor, strands of metallic tendrils tore free from his body, whipping out like barbed tentacles lashing straight toward the council. Kael grabbed Zeriah, pulling her back just in time. Sparks flew. A guard crumpled, chest pierced clean through. Protect the council! Zeriah's voice cracked through the vaulted chamber. The loyal guards closed ranks instantly. Kael spun his nunchaku. One smooth, ruthless motion. He caught a writhing tendril, wrapped it tight, and yanked hard. Metal bones snapped. Corvin roared, a sound neither fully mechanical nor fully living. The howl of a soul condemned. He was no longer a commander. He was a biological weapon of the Covenant, planted to sow betrayal at the very heart of the Zerathian Empire. Kael and Zeriah backed toward the stone pedestal, back to back. Between them, only breathing and trust. No words, no promises, only survival. A flash of light. Kael twisted, slamming a tendril to the floor. Zeriah seized the ceremonial sword, a weapon untouched by blood for 200 years. Now. It hissed as it tore through Corvin's corrupted flesh. A final roar, a violent explosion. Corvin collapsed, the glow fading from the cracks webbing across his ruined body. A heavy silence settled over the hall. This was no mere battle. It was proof. Proof that the enemy was no longer outside the gates. They had been inside the Empire's heart for a very long time. And now, They no longer needed to hide. A dry, screeching sound tore through the ship's internal speakers. Then, darkness. Every light in the grand hall snuffed out, leaving only pulsing red strobes, throbbing like the dying heartbeat of a colossal beast. Kael pulled Zeriah into the shadows along the wall. From hidden crevices, groups of Zerathian guards emerged, but not to protect the council. They charged, eyes glowing, bodies revealing mechanical sinews. "Covenant has taken them," Kael whispered, his voice low as mountain stone. Zeriah drew her sword, the blade singing as it slipped free. "There's no way back," Kael nodded. "Then we fight." He spun his nunchaku. The first strike dropped 2 corrupted soldiers. Zeriah moved with him, her blade carving arcs of cold silver. Her cracked Zerathian armor still gleamed faint blue, a lone flame against the raging storm of darkness. All around, the clash of metal, the ripping of flesh, the howls of something no longer human. Blood, red, blue, and molten silver, splattered across the ancient stones, painting a nightmare on the floor of history. Kael didn't fight like a soldier. He fought like a gatekeeper, holding the darkness back. Each strike, swift, precise, without waste. Zeriah stayed at his side, her eyes steady, unflinching. She was no longer the princess who once walked into the arena of contempt. She was a warrior, who had chosen her bridge and chose to stand upon it. A thunderous roar shook the hall. At the far end, a towering figure emerged. A covenant hybrid, 3 times the height of a man, its back fused grotesquely to the ancestral statue of Tarketh, a living mockery. Its eyes, red as spilled blood, locked onto Kael and Zeriah. No words needed. They knew. If they fell, the last bridge between 2 worlds would collapse. Zeriah tightened her grip on her sword. Kael wrapped the nunchaku tight around his wrist. They nodded. No signals, no plans. Only one thing: faith. They charged. The final battle in the heart of the Grand Hall was no longer for thrones. It was for the right to rewrite the fate of 2 worlds. And in that moment, amidst the clash of blades and the whirl of nunchaku, something miraculous happened. Every time Kael struck, every time Zeriah slipped past a blow, they were no longer 2 different creatures. They were one. One breath, one unspoken vow, one future, carved into every shining stroke of a blade against a darkness desperate to drown it all. And then, a single strike shattered the silence. The Covenant creature roared, its mechanical tendrils severed, flickering like burning roots. Kael seized the opening. The nunchaku spun, then struck out like a lightning bolt, hitting the biological joint at its neck. The blow landed clean. The massive form shuddered. For the first time, it felt pain beyond calculation. Zeriah didn't hesitate. She surged forward, her blade thrusting deep, straight into the energy core hidden beneath the Covenant's armored shell. An explosion erupted. A blinding white flare consumed its midsection, tearing away layers of steel and whispered dreams of genocide. When the light faded, the Grand Hall of Zerathian Prime was nothing but wreckage, burned steel corpses, and 2 figures still standing. Zeriah dropped to one knee. She plunged her broken sword into the cracked stone floor. Not to honor victory, but to mourn. The last time darkness would ever claim the heart of Tarketh. Kael stepped beside her. He opened his hand, revealing a strip of rough cloth. That strip was the flag of New Horizon, the first symbol of the human Zerathian alliance. Just a simple piece of worn fabric, one side embroidered with a nunchaku wrapped around a 6-pointed Zerathian star. The other side, a single line of text. "Because we chose to listen." Kael said nothing. Zeriah gave no command. Together they grasped the flag, and raised it above the rubble. A gust of wind swept through the shattered dome, carrying dust, blood, and ancient secrets once sealed in stone. The flags snapped and fluttered, not as the banner of an empire, not as the crest of any throne, but as a vow, etched in bone and breath. We are here. We have chosen, and we will never fall. Behind them, the survivors, Zerathians and humans, emerged slowly from the ruins. Their eyes turned toward the flag. Some knelt, some raised their hands, some wept openly amid the ashes, and atop the highest peak of the blackened Grand Hall, the flag of their alliance flew, rising beyond the brittle pride of the past, rising beyond wounds too old for words, becoming the first declaration of an era no one had ever dared to dream. Wind poured through the fractures of the scorched Grand Hall. The flag of the Alliance fluttered like a living flame, casting a long shadow over the shattered black stone. Kael and Zeriah stood there, amid the ashes, amid the gazes of hundreds of survivors, Zerathian and human. No one spoke. No one dared to break the moment, where history itself was breathing, drawing the first lines of a new era. Kael lowered his nunchaku. With slow, deliberate movements, he unwrapped a small ribbon tied around the hilt. He offered it to Zeriah. She took it, her fingers trembling slightly. The ribbon bore ancient characters, a symbol of peace, older than humanity's first wars. Zeriah lifted her eyes to Kael. "Where do we begin?" she asked. Kael smiled, softly, steady, like the roots of an ancient oak. With two hands, no swords, no walls, just hands, reaching out to grasp. Zeriah tied the ribbon around the broken sword's hilt. As the light from a distant star washed over them, the hilt glowed, a small torch against the endless night. Behind them, the survivors began to gather. No orders were given, no war horns sounded. Only a silent understanding. A new world would not be built with the old chains. And so New Horizon was born. Above the ravaged planet's orbit, the first skeletal ships began to form. Human and Zerathian, side by side, working, forging new paths across the ancient star maps. Zeriah stood on the balcony of the floating command station. Her white cloak shimmered, bearing the dual emblem, a nunchaku entwined with a six-pointed star. Beside her, Kael, still as simple as the day they met, his eyes calm as a lake awaiting the moon. "Look," Kael whispered. Out there, the ships of New Horizon blazed against the blackness. They spiraled into a grand helix, the eternal symbol of evolution and rebirth, each streak of light, a thread weaving a new tapestry across the stars. Zeriah didn't answer immediately. She lifted her hand and took Kael's. Two hands, one Zerathian blue, one sun-browned human, grasped tightly in the vastness of space, and that was enough. No more oaths, no more cold treaties, only a hand grasping another hand. A new universe began, born from those who dared to fall, dared to rise, and dared to believe in each other again. Some stories do not end with grand victories. No triumphal arches, no glorious titles. Only a hand extended, and another reaching back. And that is enough to weave the beginning of a new era, across a cold, endless universe, amid countless species who chose suspicion and fear. Two kinds, humanity and Zerathian, chose to believe, not because they were alike, but because they were different, and still chose to walk together. A broken sword, a silver ribbon, a handshake needing no crown, no throne, all of it. Born from the smallest crack, from a duel that once seemed meaningless. And today, as the ships of New Horizon launch themselves into the infinite, paving paths for those yet to come, we know it was not by power, not by blood, but by the courage to trust one another that humanity carved its legend ever deeper among the stars.